It begins the moment you finally open your eyes and recognize that something in the dynamic has shifted, not in you, but in them. You start to notice a pattern in the narcissist behavior that didn't exist before, a nervousness behind their arrogance, an insecurity beneath their insults, a silence that feels heavier than any words they've ever spoken. And when you notice this change, you may not realize it immediately, but this is not an accident. This is not random. This is not coincidence. This is what it looks like when the universe, when divine justice, when God himself begins to balance scales that the narcissists thought they could control forever. Because there comes a moment in every spiritual battle, every emotional war, every cycle of manipulation, when God stops watching the narcissist harm you and begins showing them the consequences of their own actions. And those consequences don't always arrive with thunder, chaos, or dramatic endings. Sometimes they arrive quietly, subtle, hidden, but powerful enough to dismantle the narcissist from the inside. And you, the person they tried to break, become the first one to notice it. The narcissist's punishment starts internally long before anyone sees it, and the moment their behavior shifts is the moment divine justice has already begun. This truth is often invisible at first, especially when you are the one who has been hurt, manipulated, or emotionally drained by them. You expect justice to look dramatic or sudden, but in reality, God works in ways that are far more precise, far more powerful, and far more personal. A narcissist's downfall is rarely external at the beginning. It starts within their own mind, their own spirit, and their own emotional instability, long before the world ever notices anything is wrong. And the very first sign of this is a subtle shift in their behavior, a shift that you notice before anyone else. The reason the punishment begins internally is because narcissists have spent their entire lives running from themselves. They avoid accountability, responsibility, and self-reflection the way other people avoid danger. They build an identity made of lies, masks, and illusions, convincing themselves they are superior, untouchable, and always right. They manipulate others to fuel this illusion because they cannot survive without external validation. When God begins dealing with them, he starts by removing the one thing that held their fragile ego together: the ability to control how others see them. This is why their behavior starts to shift. They become more anxious, more reactive, more insecure. They start second-guessing themselves. They may lash out more aggressively or fall silent and brooding. They may try harder to provoke you, or they may withdraw into strange emotional moods. They might suddenly seem lost, confused, or frustrated. And although they will never admit it, this shift happens because they feel something slipping away. The power they once held over you doesn't work the same anymore. Their lies don't stick the way they used to. Their charm doesn't land the way it once did. Their manipulation no longer pulls you back into the cycle. This loss of power is the beginning of their punishment, because for a narcissist, control is everything. Control is their comfort, their shield, their identity, their source of false strength. When that control is disrupted, even slightly, they begin to panic spiritually, mentally, and emotionally. They may not show it openly, but you will see it in their behavior. You will see it in their eyes, their tone, their reactions, their inability to predict your next move. You will see it in the way they suddenly pay too much attention to your silence or become irritated by your calmness. You will see it in how desperately they try to regain the emotional dominance they once had. This shift is not random. This is divine intervention. God has a way of humbling those who harm others while protecting the ones who were harmed. He doesn't always strike loudly. Sometimes he simply removes what the narcissist depended on the most. When God removes their control over you, he removes the source of their false identity. When he removes their ability to manipulate, he removes their ability to escape themselves. Their own mind becomes their battlefield, their own emotions become their punishment, their own lies become the chains they cannot break. This is why you are the first to notice the change. Not because the narcissist wants you to see it, but because your spirit is no longer under their influence. You are waking up, rising, healing, seeing clearly, and the clearer your vision becomes, the more distorted their behavior appears. That's not coincidence. That is spiritual separation. That is divine protection. That is God pulling you out of the darkness while exposing them to the very darkness they once used against you. And as their internal world collapses, they lose the smoothness, confidence, and emotional dominance they used to have. Their reactions become unpredictable because their internal equilibrium has been disrupted by God's justice. Their mind becomes loud with fear, insecurity, and self-doubt, all emotions they projected onto others for years. But now those emotions are theirs to carry. The punishment has already begun, and it began the moment their behavior changed. So when you notice this shift in them, when you see the tension behind their arrogance, the fear behind their anger, the instability behind their calm. Understand that this is not the beginning of their punishment. It is the evidence of it. God has already moved. God has already intervened. And their internal collapse is simply the first sign of the justice unfolding in their life. When you detach emotionally and stop reacting, the narcissist loses their illusion of power, and that loss becomes their greatest suffering. This simple shift, something that looks small from the outside, becomes the most powerful turning point in the entire dynamic. A narcissist survives off reactions, your anger, your fear, your confusion, your explanations, your defending, your attempts to be understood. Every emotional response you give them becomes fuel. It tells them that they still matter, that they still influence your inner world, that they still have access to your emotions. And as long as they can access your emotions, they believe they own you. But emotional detachment removes that access. It cuts the invisible cord that once tied your self-worth to their approval or disapproval. When you stop reacting, you take away the very oxygen their ego needs to survive. You starve the system they built around controlling you. You break the cycle they counted on repeating forever. And the narcissist, for the first time, feels true panic, not because they care about you, because they no longer control you. This is where the suffering begins. Narcissists do not know how to exist without control. Their entire identity is built around it. When they manipulate, they feel powerful. When they provoke emotions, they feel significant. When they create chaos, they feel confident. Chaos is their safety because chaos keeps you off balance, but emotional detachment removes the chaos. It removes the drama. It removes the tension. It removes the psychological hooks they relied on. And when the chaos stops, they are left alone with themselves, a place they have avoided their entire lives. Your silence becomes their mirror. Your calmness becomes their exposure. Your lack of reaction becomes a reflection of how powerless they truly are, and they feel it immediately. They will never say it. They will never admit it. They will never show it clearly. But emotionally, psychologically, spiritually, they feel the shift like a collapse from within. They begin to sense that something is slipping out of their hands. They sense that the old tactics are failing. They sense that the hold they once had over your mind is fading, and this terrifies them. You become unpredictable to them, and unpredictability makes them feel unsafe. They cannot read you anymore. They cannot manipulate you in the same ways. They cannot trigger you into defending yourself. They cannot bait you into an argument. They cannot use guilt, shame, or fear to pull you back into their cycle. They keep trying, but every attempt falls flat, and each failure destabilizes them a little more. This is where the illusion of power begins to break. The narcissist never had real power. They had influence over your emotions only because you cared. You tried, you wanted to fix, you wanted peace, you wanted the relationship to work. Your emotional investment is what made their manipulation possible, but emotional detachment breaks that investment, and when your investment ends, their illusion of power collapses. It is not your rejection that hurts them, it is your neutrality. Narcissists can handle love and they can handle hate, but they cannot handle indifference. Indifference is the one thing they have no weapon against. It disarms them completely. It exposes their fragility. It forces them to feel the emptiness they've spent their entire life avoiding. And that emptiness becomes their suffering. They start questioning themselves in ways they never have. They start wondering why their tactics no longer work. They start feeling insecure, angry, anxious, and desperate. They may lash out. They may act superior. They may become silent. They may begin love bombing again. They may smear your name. They may try to provoke jealousy. But all of these behaviors are symptoms of the same internal truth. They are losing control, and that loss of control is the deepest punishment they can experience. Because without control, they cannot maintain the false identity they built. Without control, their ego falls apart. Without control, they are forced to face their own inadequacies. Without control, they become a frightened child trapped inside an adult body, unable to manage their own emotions. Your emotional detachment exposes them to themselves. It reveals the truth they never wanted to see. It shows them that power was never theirs. It was borrowed from your emotional responses. And now that the borrowing is over, they are left spiritually bankrupt, emotionally exposed, and psychologically unstable. This is why your detachment is so powerful. It is not just a boundary. It is a dismantling of their entire internal world. It is the moment their greatest illusion collapses, the illusion that they were untouchable, superior, and always in control. And that collapse becomes their greatest suffering. Not because you punished them, but because the truth finally did. God punishes the narcissist by exposing them to the emptiness, insecurity, and accountability they've avoided their entire lives. This keynote reveals a deeper truth about divine justice, one that doesn't rely on dramatic scenes, loud consequences, or visible destruction. Instead, God reaches into the very space the narcissist has been running from their inner world. For years, maybe even decades, a narcissist builds their identity on avoidance. They avoid responsibility because taking responsibility would force them to acknowledge their flaws. They avoid accountability because accountability would confront their ego. They avoid vulnerability because vulnerability would reveal how emotionally fragile they truly are. Their entire personality is a structure designed to escape themselves. But God does not let a person run forever. When God decides it is time for a narcissist to experience the consequences of their behavior, he does not begin by punishing them externally. He begins internally. He takes away the illusions they used for protection and forces them to meet the truth about who they are, what they've done, and the pain they've caused. The very things they projected onto others, fear, insecurity, shame, guilt, become emotions they can no longer escape. And for someone who has never learned to face themselves, this becomes a form of emotional torment. A narcissist's emptiness is the first place God exposes them. They have spent their lives filling that inner void with attention, admiration, control, drama. Their manipulation, their identity depends on other people's reactions. They need to be praised, feared, envied, or depended on. Anything but ignored, anything but exposed. But when God removes the external distractions they consume to keep their emptiness hidden, they suddenly feel the full weight of that void. They feel the hollowness behind their arrogance. They feel the loneliness behind their superiority. They feel the lack of inner peace they have avoided confronting. Emptiness becomes their punishment because for the first time, they are forced to sit with the truth that they have nothing inside to sustain them. Then comes insecurity. Narcissists pretend to be confident, but that false confidence is built on very unstable ground. Their sense of worth is external, never internal. They believe they are valuable only when someone else tells them they are. They believe they are powerful only when someone else reacts to them. They believe they are important only when someone else gives them attention. So when God removes the people they manipulated, when he lifts their victims away, protects their targets, and closes doors they used to walk through, the narcissist feels a drop in internal stability. Suddenly, they cannot find validation. Suddenly, their charm isn't working. Suddenly, the lies don't land the same. Suddenly, people see through them. This shift awakens their deepest insecurity. They begin asking themselves the questions they've avoided their entire life. What am I without control? Who am I without admiration? What do I become when I cannot manipulate anyone? And these questions torment them because they've never learned how to live without the external supply their ego depended on. Their insecurity becomes louder than their confidence. Their arrogance becomes weaker than their fear. Their false identity begins to crack under the weight of exposure. Finally, God exposes them to accountability, the one reality they fear more than anything else. Accountability means facing consequences. Accountability means admitting wrongdoing. Accountability means acknowledging the pain they caused. And narcissists spend their whole life running from this. They lie to avoid it. They blame others. They play the victim, they rewrite stories, they create illusions, they do anything to avoid responsibility. But when God steps in, he removes the escape routes, he reveals their patterns, he exposes their lies. He takes away the people who used to enable them. He shows their true character to others. And suddenly, the narcissist is trapped in a truth they cannot manipulate their way out of. This accountability is spiritual, it is emotional, it is psychological. It does not always look like public downfall. Sometimes it looks like restless nights, anxiety that won't go away, relationships that no longer work, masks that no longer fit, goals that feel unreachable, and emptiness that grows louder every day. It looks like a person finally being confronted with the truth of who they are without the ability to run. And while this is happening inside them, the world may see nothing. On the outside, they may continue pretending to be confident or in control, but on the inside, something is crumbling. Their spirit is unsettled. Their ego is cracking. Their illusions are weakening. And the pain they brought into others' lives begins circling back to them, not as revenge, but as divine correction. The narcissist is punished not by what is taken from them, but by what they can no longer escape. Their emptiness, their insecurity, their accountability. And that internal unraveling becomes the justice they can no longer avoid. Your healing, growth, and rising strength become part of their punishment, because it dismantles the control they believed they had over you. This truth is one of the most powerful and liberating realizations you can ever experience after surviving a narcissistic relationship. Narcissists spend their lives feeding off the weaknesses, insecurities, fears, and emotional wounds of others. They rely on your confusion to manipulate you, your empathy to control you, your fear to silence you, and your desire for peace to keep you compliant. But the moment you begin to heal, truly heal, everything they built begins to collapse. Your growth becomes the very thing they cannot stop, cannot predict, and cannot manipulate, and that growth becomes the punishment they never saw coming. Healing from a narcissist is not just recovery, it is transformation. Every step you take toward understanding yourself, reclaiming your worth, and learning what you truly deserve becomes a blow to their ego. They thrive on the belief that you will stay broken, stay attached, stay confused, and stay available for their control. They assume they will always be able to come back, trigger you, or pull you back into their cycle. But when you rise, when you rebuild your self-esteem, when you gain clarity, and when you stop giving them emotional access, the narcissist experiences something they cannot handle: the loss of their psychological dominance. Your healing exposes their failure. They thought they destroyed you. They thought they weakened you permanently. They thought their manipulation would bury your sense of self. They believed their behavior would diminish your confidence so deeply you would never rise again. But instead, you begin to grow. You begin to evolve. You begin to become even stronger than before. The very things they tried to break become the areas where you develop your greatest strength, and they cannot understand it. They cannot process it. It goes against their entire worldview. To a narcissist, your strength feels like betrayal. It feels like abandonment. It feels like an attack, even though it isn't. Your growth confronts the truth they've avoided their entire lives. They are not as powerful as they believed. They cannot control people forever. Their manipulation has limits. Their charm has an expiration date, and the people they take for granted eventually outgrow them. Your rising strength shatters the story they created about you. Narcissists rewrite reality in their minds to justify their actions. They convince themselves you were weak, overly emotional, dependent, or easily controlled. But as you heal, your true strength becomes undeniable. Your boundaries become firm. Your voice becomes clear. Your intuition becomes sharp. You begin seeing through their tactics instantly. You stop reacting, you stop feeding their ego, you stop allowing them near your emotions, and suddenly the entire script they've built collapses. This collapse is not just emotional, it is spiritual. Your growth forces the narcissist to face what they have always been afraid of: your independence, your confidence, your clarity, your self-worth. These qualities make you immune to their manipulation. And nothing is more threatening to a narcissist than someone who sees their game and refuses to play it. They begin to feel powerless, irrelevant, unseen, and unimportant. These are emotions they absolutely cannot tolerate. Your healing also takes away their access to your energy. Narcissists feed on emotional energy, good or bad. Whether you are crying, apologizing, explaining, arguing, or trying to fix things, you are giving them fuel. But when you heal, you stop giving them this fuel. You stop explaining yourself. You stop chasing them. You stop reacting. You stop allowing them to influence your feelings, and when the emotional supply dries up, the narcissist feels it as a form of internal collapse. They become restless, frustrated, jealous, and even angry at your peace. Your calmness irritates them because it reminds them that you've grown beyond their reach. Your silence scares them because it signals you no longer fear losing them. Your confidence threatens them because it exposes their lack of true value, and your happiness without them torments them far more than any revenge ever could. To them, your rising becomes proof that everything they told you about yourself was a lie. They told you no one else would want you, yet you found peace. They told you you'd fall apart without them, yet you grew stronger. They told you they were the best you would ever have, yet your life improved the moment they left. They told you that you were the problem, yet your healing reveals clearly that the chaos only existed where they existed. Your growth becomes a mirror they cannot handle. It reflects their weaknesses, their failures, and their limitations. It shows that you were never the helpless person they painted you as. You were the one holding everything together. And losing someone like you becomes their spiritual punishment. Because they now have to live with the truth, they misused their blessing, underestimated your strength, and destroyed the only source of genuine love they had. And that realization does not just hurt them, it dismantles them. Your healing is not just your freedom, it is their consequence. Your rising is not just your victory, it is their downfall. Your strength is not just your transformation, it is the punishment they created for themselves through their own actions. Your growth becomes the justice they cannot escape. The narcissist doesn't replace you. They replay you over and over again, and your absence forces them to confront what they lost and took for granted. This keynote reveals one of the deepest, most misunderstood truths about narcissistic behavior. They don't simply move on the way people assume. They don't forget you, replace you, or erase you the moment you walk away. Instead, they return to the memories, the dynamics, the feelings, and the roles you played in their life because those roles were the source of their emotional supply. You were never just a person to them. You were a function, a resource, a mirror, a lifeline to the validation they needed. And when you leave, even if they appear unbothered, something inside them begins to unravel. People often assume the narcissist quickly replaces their victims because they jump into new relationships or surround themselves with new supply. But externally replacing someone is not the same as internally letting them go. Narcissists cannot truly let people go because they never process their emotions or resolve their attachments. They store people like files in their mind, reopening old memories whenever they need a boost of ego or a reminder of someone who once gave them power. But when you detach, when you stop feeding their ego, when you stop reacting, you interrupt the story they wrote in their head, and suddenly they can't access you the way they once did. You become a ghost in their mind, present, but out of reach. This is where the replay begins. The narcissist replays your kindness because it's rare. They replay your loyalty because others don't give them the same devotion. They replay your patience because most people leave at the first sign of their toxicity. They replay your love because it made them feel special in a way they can't recreate. They replay the way you forgave them, soothed them, defended them, and believed in them. They replay the moments when you saw them in their darkest places and still tried to help. They replay the times they wounded you and you still gave them another chance. But this replaying is not romantic, it is psychological torment, because now they are forced to face the reality that they lost someone irreplaceable, not because you were perfect, but because you gave them a form of emotional safety and validation they cannot find elsewhere. You love them with sincerity, and narcissists struggle to find that kind of love again because they don't know how to build it. They only know how to extract it, and extraction never produces depth. So even when they find a new partner, new friend, new admirer, or new supply, they compare them to you. They look for your qualities. They look for your tolerance. They look for your emotional availability. They look for your forgiveness. And they never find it because the new supply does not come with your history, your investment, your effort, or your soul. And this is where the punishment intensifies. Your absence becomes a form of suffering for them. The narcissist may appear confident. They may act like they've moved on. They may show off someone new. They may brag, flaunt, or pretend they're happier than ever. But this is performance, not healing. Their ego needs to appear unaffected, even though internally they feel the loss more deeply than they admit. The replaying becomes obsessive at times. They remember the moments when they felt superior or adored. They remember how easily they could trigger you. They remember how quickly you'd soften when they showed vulnerability. They remember how predictable your love was and how secure their control felt. But now that control is gone. And the narcissist doesn't know how to cope with loss because loss exposes the truth they try to avoid. They are emotionally dependent on the people they manipulate. They need you far more than you ever needed them. This realization comes slowly, painfully, as they replay the past in their mind and compare it to the emptiness of their present. They don't replay you because they loved you in a healthy way. They replay you because your absence highlights their internal emptiness. You represented everything they wished they could be: empathetic, loving, resilient, and whole. And now, without access to your emotional world, they feel the full weight of their own brokenness. This replaying is also a form of karma. It forces them to confront the truth they avoided while they had you. You were a blessing. You were the stability they abused. You were the loyalty they misused. You were the love they betrayed. And now they live with the consequences of their own choices, not by losing someone replaceable, but by losing someone unforgettable. The more you grow, heal, and move forward, the sharper that replay becomes for them. The more they see you living freely, the more they realize what they threw away. The more peace you experience, the more chaos they feel. The more clarity you gain, the more confused they become. And the more you become the person they tried to destroy, the more they are forced to replay every moment they underestimated you. You are not replaying them, but they are replaying you. And that replay becomes the punishment they can never escape. The sixth keynote reveals a truth many people sense but struggle to put into words. Your peace becomes their chaos. And when God lifts you, he humbles them. This dynamic is not accidental, nor is it something you have to force. It unfolds naturally and spiritually because the narcissist's world depends entirely on the disturbance they cause in yours. The moment you begin to rise, heal, and reclaim the energy they used to feed on, the balance shifts. They feel it deeply, even if they pretend they don't. Narcissists don't fear losing people. They fear losing access, influence, and the ability to project their brokenness onto someone else. When you find peace, their supply crumbles, and that collapse becomes a divine form of correction. Your peace is not quiet, it is powerful. It sends a signal that the narcissist has lost the grip they thought would last forever. And the more you move forward without them, the louder that signal becomes. Peace is not passive. It is the declaration of freedom. They once thrived when you doubted yourself, second-guessed your decisions, and carried the emotional weight they refused to acknowledge. But when you step into peace, you lay that weight down. You stop engaging in battles that were never yours to fight. You no longer react to their provocations, and that silence becomes deafening to them. They interpret your peace not just as distance, but as a threat to their identity, because your refusal to engage means you're no longer participating in the role they assigned you. When God lifts you, the narcissist feels it like a storm they cannot control. They might not understand the spiritual dimension of what's happening, but they recognize the shift in the atmosphere. They feel the loss of your presence, your kindness, your patience, your support, and your loyalty, qualities they thought were endless. They believed they could drain you without consequence, but divine order does not work that way. God is not mocked. When someone sows chaos, manipulation, and destruction, they eventually reap the consequences. Your elevation becomes part of their lesson. Every blessing you receive, every moment of clarity you gain, and every layer of healing you embrace becomes a reminder of what they forfeited. The narcissist's identity is built on the illusion that they are superior, desirable, and irreplaceable. So when you grow in ways they never expected, it shakes the foundation of that illusion. They relied on you believing you needed them, and when you prove that you never did, their ego cracks. It is in those cracks that God begins his work. The narcissist feels the consequences not through lightning bolts or dramatic punishment, but through the weight of what they can no longer control. Their arrogance meets reality, their pride meets truth, their manipulation loses power, and their constant need for admiration encounters silence. For someone who lives off external validation, this silence is a spiritual draught. Your peace exposes their chaos. It shows them that the turmoil they feel has nothing to do with you and everything to do with what lives inside them. As you rise, they fall deeper into the void they've been escaping for years. They return to old patterns, old distractions, old relationships, and old behaviors, only to discover that none of it fills the emptiness. This is not your punishment to deliver, this is God's. And the more you heal, the more they unravel. The narcissist's greatest suffering comes from watching you thrive because it contradicts the narrative they created about you. They expected you to break, collapse, chase them, or remain stuck in the pain they caused. Instead, you became stronger, you rebuilt, you found clarity. And that is what humbles them, not by your intention, but by divine design. God lifting you is not just about blessing your life. It is about restoring what was taken from you emotionally, mentally, and spiritually. It is a reminder that no one gets away with mistreating a pure heart. When God elevates you, he also exposes them. He reveals their true nature to the world, to themselves, and sometimes even to the very people they once used to triangulate you. They lose credibility, respect, and influence because the truth eventually surfaces. Meanwhile, your light grows brighter, your vision becomes clearer, and your path becomes smoother. Your peace becomes the proof that God never stopped fighting for you, and their chaos becomes the result of losing someone they thought they owned. That is the divine balance. That is the justice they never saw coming.